I was icing cupcakes on my birthday, keeping the kitchen quiet the way I pretend to like it, when the doorbell sliced the silence and a man I'd never seen stood there with a cardboard cake box, and my name balanced on his tongue. "Lily?" he asked. He looked late 30s, careful eyes, posture of someone carrying a favor that wasn't his. He handed me a white envelope. My name on it was in the one handwriting I could have picked from a crowd of ghost blocky letters softened by clumsy curls. My father's handwriting, 20 years gone. "I was told to bring this today," he said, "on your birthday." After my mother passed, I let him in because grief opened the door before caution could. He set the cake on the table as if it held water. "I'm Aaron," he said. "My mother kept this for years. She told me to deliver it when she couldn't." I slid a butter knife under the flap. On a small line card, my father's voice came back. Raw and simple. "Lily, I owe you a birthday cake. I owe you a lot. Start with this one. Ask the person who brought it to take you to the oak. You'll see. Love, Dad." The world tilted in that ordinary kitchen. Cruel, impossible, merciful, all three at once. "The oak?" I asked. "In the community garden on 17th, Aaron said. "My mother volunteered there. She said you'd know which tree." I did. On my 7th birthday, my father took me there with gas station donuts, and told me shade could be a kind of gift. He missed other birthdays after that, especially the 10th, the worst one. He showed up 3 days late with a lopsided grocery store cake and a smile. He must have practiced in a bathroom mirror. I refused a slice because anger felt like power. He said, "Patient, that's okay. I owe you a better one." It stayed a family joke until jokes became too fragile to touch. "Why did your mother have his letter?" I asked. Aaron pulled out a rubber-banded notebook, pages filled in a neat, tidy script. "A ledger," he said. "She cleaned houses when my dad was sick. Your father paid our rent for 3 months and wouldn't take credit." She wrote, "Every favor, what came in, what went out so the world could feel balanced, even if it wasn't." My father, who died with final notices stacked on the counter, had been quietly generous to strangers. The picture in my head straightened on its hook. We opened the cake box. It was homemade pretty, to Lily, piped in a hand that tried and mostly succeeded. A paper candle lay beside it, like permission not to light anything if I didn't want to. "Will you come?" Aaron asked. "To the oak." Belief is a cliff, but the card was a rope. I grabbed my keys. On the drive he told me small, bright things about his mother. How she hummed when she scrubbed, how she counted exact change even when no one asked. I told him small things about my dad, the bad whistling at commercials, the toolbox he burned my name into, the wooden toys he made when we couldn't afford plastic ones. The community garden looked like an apology made with flowers. The oak stood at the far corner with ship-shouldered branches. Up close, the bark had old palm grooves and a knot like a keyhole. Aaron knelt by the trunk and brushed away cedar chips until the edge of a metal tin showed through. He levered it loose with his fingers and handed it to me. Inside were 3 things: a Polaroid of us under this very tree, a small brass key labeled basement, and another card. On the back of the photo he'd written, "Clumsy and careful, there you are." The card said, "Lily, I'm trying to leave you only the good. If I can't, here's where the bad ends: basement locker at the West bus station. That's where I put what I shouldn't have taken the day I missed your birthday, and the ledger of what I still owe. Take the key, do what's fit. If there's any feast in my life, let it be this, that I didn't leave you hungry. Love you, Dad." The word ledger had weight now. Aaron looked away to give me privacy with something impossible. "She wanted you to have the choice," he said softly, "to close it or open it." We drove to the bus station with the cake box buckled in like a passenger. The locker key turned like a yes. Inside were 2 rubber-banded envelopes, one thin, one fat. The thin one was a letter to me I wasn't ready to read. The fat one was stuffed with names, receipts, and numbers. My father's frantic scrawl beside the tidy hand I now knew was Aaron's mother's. It wasn't a list of thefts. It was a record of repayments and attempted repayments, utility bills covered, groceries delivered, envelopes slid under doors and never claimed. I sat on the grimy tile floor laughing and crying at once, while two teenagers argued with a vending machine that wouldn't give up its chips. The ordinary world kept moving, which somehow made all of this feel more true. "What do you want to do?" Aaron asked. "Finish it," I said. "Clear the last lines, then turn the page." On the way to the station we had passed the diner, where my father once folded napkins into boats after a storm ruined our picnic. The sign still flickered, the same letter, broken, as if time prefers certain exact mistakes. In the station a janitor pushed a slow broom, and a little boy pressed his face to a candy case, while his mother said "not tonight," in a voice that made tonight sound like a promise instead of a denial. That afternoon we began closing the debt my father had kept in paper and promise. At a utility office, a clerk with glitter on her eyelids, read a balance in a careful voice, and relief softened her shoulders when I slid a receipt back across the counter and said it was done. At a narrow church with a food pantry, we stacked boxes until our arms shook. It felt like setting a table for someone we'd never meet. At a small apartment with a crooked porch light, we left a card with cash for a man who'd never met my father and had unknowingly been part of his algebra. Back at my kitchen, I set to plates. I lit a single real candle, chose fire instead of paper. "You're late," I told the quiet room, "but you're real." I cut the first slice for me, and the second for a man who tried. Grief didn't vanish, it never does. But it shifted, like furniture pushed back to make room for dancing. The next morning we returned to the garden. A volunteer waved a hose so the spray arced like bright thread while we fixed a small brass plaque to the bench under the oak. It read, "For those who keep their promises, even late." The tree made a sound like a laugh when the wind touched it. We sat a while and let quiet do the talking. That night I finally read the thin letter. My father didn't ask for forgiveness. He wrote that love isn't proof you won't fail, only proof you'll try again. That he had been ashamed of the kind of luck he chased, and proud of the kind he learned to make. That shame is a kind of superstition, and I must not let it tell me what I deserve. That he hoped one day I'd rewrite our joke for him. "If you keep the candle," he ended, "keep it bent. That's how light remembers wind." I washed the plates and watched my reflection wobble in the window glass. I looked like him when he wasn't drowning, just a person with a day's work done, and a small smile that might belong to tomorrow. The ledger lies in my drawer now with the cashier's check, receipt, and the Polaroid. Under the oak, the bench waits. Sometimes I sit there and think about the invisible math of kindness. Sometimes I bring donuts and let the sugar dust my tongue. The way a small memory can powder a larger one. I don't call any of this closure. Some doors should stay on their hinges. But the page has turned, and the list titled Cake has one last line filled. I don't know what I'll do with the ledger long term. Maybe copy its pages before the ink fades. Maybe keep it as a private grammar for a better story. But for now it lives beside spare batteries and rubber bands. Ordinary objects that rescue days more often than grand plans ever do. When I texted my son goodnight, he wrote, "Grandpa would be proud." I don't know if that's true, but I like how it feels to try believing it. Near midnight, I ate the final slice alone, but not lonely, and decided that next year, I'll invite people before they can say maybe. Somewhere a dog barked. A lawnmower droned its one-note song. A bus sighed and pulled away. Somewhere a man wrote a name on the toolbox and whistled badly at a commercial. Somewhere a woman counted up the day and called it enough. And me, I stood in a kitchen that had finally stopped echoing and decided that late isn't the opposite of true. Sometimes late is the road truth takes when it's heavy and needs to rest. And when it arrives, if you let it, it still tastes like sugar. At the very back of the fat envelope, I found a small cashier's check dated to weeks before he died. Modest by the measure of vacations and cars, large by the measure of a man trying to glue a life back together. Tucked beside it was a single sheet titled in his hopeful block letters, "Cake." Underneath were names and occasions, some kept, some missed. Next to mine he had written, with a child's honesty, "Late but real." I told Aaron the story. I almost never tell that on my 10th birthday, when I refused the late cake. My father wore a paper crown while he washed the dishes, set bright on his forearms, crown, slipping over one eye, and he made trumpet sounds for each plate until I laughed despite myself. And I hated that laugh for years because it proved anger couldn't hold everything.